This is the story of Allen Stanford, the self-styled billionaire who built a Caribbean empire on lies. A man who sold a dream of wealth, sunshine, and prestige, until the truth revealed an enormous Ponzi scheme that fooled regulators, investors, and even the world of cricket. Welcome to Crooks in Suits. Today's story is Ponzi of the Caribbean. My name is Ray. I'm a chartered accountant, and I've worked as a chief financial officer across fintech and banking. Allen Stanford was born in 1950 in Texas into a middle-class family with small-town ambitions. His father owned a modest business, and Stanford grew up craving affluence. In school, he wasn't remarkable academically, but he was charming, obsessive about money, and fascinated by how wealth could create power. Stanford's first ventures were in health clubs and property in Texas during the 1980s. The health clubs went bust, but his real estate business was profitable. When the savings and loan crisis hit in the 1980s, he spotted an opportunity in offshore banking. That's when he moved his base to the Caribbean, where regulations were lighter, and his American accent and extravagant lifestyle played perfectly into his emerging persona as an international banker. In 1985, Stanford founded Stanford International Bank in Montserrat. It marketed itself as a private offshore bank offering secure, high-return certificates of deposit, often advertising investment returns several points above US banks. Soon, large sums flowed in from wealthy clients and retirees who were chasing high gains with supposedly low risk. When Montserrat tightened his financial rules in the early 1990s, Stanford simply relocated to Antigua, just 30 miles away, where he quickly ingratiated himself with the local politicians and power brokers. Antigua and Barbuda is a small Caribbean country consisting of 2 islands, with a population of approximately 100,000, and it had lax banking rules at the time. By the early 2000s, Stanford had become one of the Caribbean's most powerful figures. His Stanford Financial Group claimed over $8 billion in assets. He funded schools, hospitals, and lavish local events. His influence brought him legitimacy. But in truth, there were no miracle investments, just money coming from new investors to pay older investors out. Just an old-fashioned Ponzi scheme. And in 2006, thanks to his massive donations and close ties to the Antiguan government, he was knighted by the island's prime minister. It was the ultimate act of respectability. So Allen Stanford, billionaire banker and Caribbean savior. I was surprised they're knighted. I thought it was confined to the UK. Turns out that a few Commonwealth countries can offer knighthoods. These are Antigua, Grenada, New Zealand, and St. Lucia. His new headquarters was a palatial white marble complex that symbolized wealth and confidence. It was located on top of a hill near the airport. It stood as one of the first sights on arrival. A prominent white neoclassical structure with columns, palm trees, lush tropical landscaping, and manicured hedges. Stanford loved the image of success. He traveled in private jets, he maintained a fleet of yachts, and he kept multiple luxury homes. He was known for his charisma. He surrounded himself with beautiful women, celebrity friends, and employees who idolized him or feared him. His private life was colorful. He had 6 children with 4 wives or mistresses, and acquired his own island, Guyana Island. Antigua seized it in March 2009 after the scandal broke to prevent claims from US liquidators. Stanford even sank $16 million into refitting his 112-foot motor yacht, the Sea Eagle, gutting it to the hull for new engines and luxury interiors. It was later auctioned off as is for just $3 million in 2010, complete with leftover china, silverware, sculptures, and Stanford financial logo etched on a mirror. Those closest to him described him as a mix of showman and tyrant, charming in public, ruthless in private. He believed appearances made reality, an essential mindset for running a fraud built on illusion. Stanford saw cricket as the perfect vehicle to cement his legacy. In 2008, he staged the Stanford 2020 series, injecting his own money into Caribbean cricket and later hosting the sensational Stanford Super Series in Antigua. The prize, $20 million for a single match, winner takes all. Players called it the richest game in cricket history. That was the first time I came across his name. The spectacle made global headlines. For brief moments, Stanford looked unstoppable, a flamboyant savior of both cricket and the Caribbean economy. But beneath the lights, the money came from the same fraudulent pot used to pay fake investment returns. Stanford International Bank operated on a massive scale before its 2009 collapse. It maintained about 50 offices across multiple countries, primarily in the Americas, such as the US, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with outposts in Europe and Asia. The firm theoretically managed roughly $8.5 billion in assets for over 30,000 clients, spanning 136 countries, supported by hundreds of employees in sales, operation, and management roles worldwide. So what was the fraud? It was just a Ponzi scheme, Allen Stanford and executives like Chief Financial Officer James Davis diverted billions in client deposits, over $1.6 billion to Stanford personally via secret loans, while fabricating financial statements, investor income, and historical performance data to convince investors. And of course, deposit withdrawals were paid from the new deposits. Allen Stanford justified his certificates of deposits unusually high 10 to 16% returns by claiming superior investment management and Antigua's tax advantages. He promoted a fabricated Tier 3 portfolio of marketable securities, delivering consistent gains, immune to market crashes, supposedly audited and diversified globally, while telling sales teams these beat US banks due to offshore efficiencies and his personal oversight. Stanford starred in numerous glossy promotional videos for Stanford Financial Group, aired on US TV in the 2000s. These infomercials showed him in a tailored suit with his signature gold money pin, touting high-yield certificates of deposits as safe as US Treasuries, with consistent 10 to 12% returns from diversified portfolios. Pure fiction to bring in investors while he siphoned off billions. No fraud on the scale happens without accomplices. Key enablers included Chief Financial Officer James Davis, alongside 2 senior accountants, and Chief Investment Officer Laura Prendergast-Holt. They fabricated reports, managed fake portfolios, and processed transactions to sustain appearances. Leroy King was Antigua's top financial regulator. He actively protected Stanford's fraud and fobbed off SEC requests. He took bribes, Super Bowl tickets, and private jet flights from Stanford. Over in the background, whispers of irregularities were growing louder. Former employees questioned how the bank consistently posted such high returns. Regulators from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, began digging. Internal members from as early as 2005 had raised alarms. Client funds were being diverted into illiquid assets and property ventures, and accounting records were doctored to conceal losses. But Stanford's political connections and polished operations delayed scrutiny. As for Madoff, the 2008 financial crisis became the final blow. Investors began withdrawing funds en masse, and the cash simply wasn't there. Stanford tried to reassure clients that all was well, but soon even his own staff could no longer keep the facade up. This prompted the SEC to take a closer look. In 2009, the SEC charged Allen Stanford and his executives with running an $8 billion Ponzi scheme. Offices were raided in Houston, Miami, and Antigua. His assets, jets, yachts, and luxury estates were seized. This was soon followed by criminal charges, and the man who appeared to be worth billions was suddenly behind the bars. So what is the fallout? Thousands of investors were wiped out. From retirees to sports stars who trusted his name, investors got back 30 to 40%, not counting fictitious gains. However, this took many years. They seized assets such as real estate, yachts, and jets, which all had to be sold. During his trial, prosecutors painted Stanford as a manipulative fraudster who used investors' money to fuel his lavish lifestyle. He was prosecuted in U.S. courts because he had been soliciting U.S. investors. His offshore status did not help him. He denied everything, claiming the collapse was due to mismanagement rather than fraud. The jury didn't buy it. In 2012, he was sentenced to 110 years in prison, and he forfeited all his assets. It'll be some time before he can get up his old tricks again. Antigua lost one of its largest employees, and its reputation as a financial hub took a hit. His knighthood was revoked, the cricket ventures disbanded, and the once grand Stanford brand vanished overnight. It amazes me that the auditors did not spot the fraud. Stanford claimed the missing money was all sitting in a global portfolio, and they accepted forged documents as confirmation. The auditors later settled with investors for $65 million. After all, the investors had relied on the clean audit reports. James Davis, the CFO, got 5 years, a relatively low sentence as he had cooperated with authorities. The 2 accountants got 20 years each, partly because they did not cooperate. And Laura Prendergast-Holt got 3 years, more for obstruction of justice than perpetrating the fraud. Leroy King, the regulator, got 10 years. All sentences were served in US prisons. In some frauds, we see a slow drift into fraud, whereas I don't think Stanford had any initial intention of running an honest business. He was thoroughly crooked. Allen Stanford's story is a textbook case of illusion, ambition, and greed. It's a reminder that charisma and confidence can mask the hollow core of fraud, especially when fortune, fame, and flattery all play along. Please remember to subscribe, give me a like, and look out for the next story on Crooks in Suits.